And I begin by introducing David Morgan, who is very familiar to those of us involved in maritime heritage in the UK. I first got to meet David about nearly 30 years ago in the very early days of Heritage Afloat, which was, of course, the predecessor of Maritime Heritage Trust. David's going to tell us a little bit about the history now, not only of EMH, but of MHT, because, of course, one of the great figures in maritime preservation has recently died, namely Prince Philip. And it would be wrong of us not to remember his contribution tonight. So David, who was president of European Maritime Heritage from 2017 to 2020, and involved for many years before that, is going to tell us a little bit about where we've come from. David, over to you.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Henry. Let me know if you can't hear me.
No, can hear you fine.
I think I'll just explain that I'm going slightly off message, as Henry just explained, because Prince Philip was, of course, our royal patron for many years, and I do want to acknowledge his contribution, which I'll explain in due course. So I'm not just concentrating on the EMH factor, although I will end up focusing on that rather than on the domestic history. So in 1994, I was sailing on the SS Shieldhall around the Isle of Wight as one of its founding directors of its salvation and restoration, and a group of owners and operators of historic vessels who were traveling as passengers were complaining that none of them had been invited to a meeting scheduled for that day to form what was then called the Common European Maritime Heritage Forum, now known as EMH, or the European Maritime Heritage. I pointed out to them that we didn't even have a national body, let alone a European one. But as a result, I was asked to set one up, which I did with the help of John Robinson, then the Deputy Director of the Science Museum, and we called it Heritage Afloat, which Henry has just alluded to, which in due course joined EMH as the UK's national representative body. Again, thanks to the initiative of John Robinson, who became a member of EMH's executive. In 2011, Heritage Afloat merged into the Maritime Trust, which had been founded in 1969, and it is now, the merged body is now known as the Maritime Heritage Trust. The Maritime Trust had collected and saved for posterity 23 historic vessels, including the Cutty Sark, and Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, agreed to become its royal patron and proved an invaluable supporter, especially when it came to raising money for the refurbishment of the Cutty Sark. I had been invited to join the board of Maritime Trust by Admiral Sir John Oswald, then the First Sea Lord, and later found myself to be its chairman as well as the chairman of Heritage Afloat. So it was natural that I should seek to merge the two. I felt I should ask seek Prince Philip's blessing. And literally, as I write this sentence, when I prepared this paper a few weeks ago, the message came through that he had died, rendering the preparation of this presentation particularly poignant. Prince Philip invited me to discuss the merger over tea, but his only comment was to say, "I can't think why I didn't do it before." Prince Philip was very much a hands-on patron. Although he was not formally a member of the Trust's governing council, he often hosted its meetings at Buckingham Palace. Non-membership of the council, however, never stopped him from commenting during its discussions, and I don't suppose that comes as a surprise to anyone, certainly not the British contingent. I will always remember his comments at one such meeting when we learnt that the Labour government was converting the National Historic Ships Committee into a quango, which is a quasi-national government organisation. "Well, that means they will take over our role," he said. "We might as well wind up the trust." My colleague, my co-trustees, nodded in agreement. I'm afraid I expressed dissent. I said, I beg to differ, if only for the purpose of debate. Why should anyone disagree with me, he asked. I replied that it would be sad to wave goodbye to all the trust it collected and would collect in the future. Why did no one else tell me that, was the tart reply. As a reward, I was the only trustee to receive an invitation to his 80th birthday party. So it's due to Prince Philip that we had the success we did. And of course, we raised a lot in the Maritime Trust, which we've put to good use in the new organization. If I may now go on to the foreign affairs, I should start with saying that the first involvement in overseas affairs was in persuading the International Maritime Organization, based here in London, to support reciprocal recognition of national safety requirements. EMH held occasional meetings and seminars and also set up a safety council. It established a cultural council as well, which played a leading role in setting up the Barcelona Charter, which itself was based on the Athens Charter drawn up for the benefit of the built heritage in 1921, and followed in turn by the Venice Charter of 1964. The Barcelona Charter established ground rules for the conservation and sympathetic future use of historic vessels. And as an addition here, may I just say that it's been adopted in places as far afield as Australia and the Americas. So it has been a success. Anyway, I digress. Over the years, the Maritime Heritage Trust has participated in EMH conferences and meetings. In the early years, it concentrated on European concentration. However, it seemed more recently that there was friction between one or two of our continental colleagues, not helped by overdominance by one or two countries. In 2017, I attended a meeting in Bremerhaven, Germany, not entirely unknown to Thomas Hopper, when this friction burst out into the open. Both Germany, represented by Thomas Hopper, and the UK, which I represented, intervened to stop a civil war. As a result, Thomas and I were invited to take over. To our amazement, we realized that the EMH had no formal constitution. In fairness, its informal rules had worked quite well over 24 years of existence. But we also learned that we were not eligible for EU grants unless we had a formal constitution for over 3 years. And so that was last August that came into being. And we took advice from a very eminent Dutch lawyer recommended by our Dutch colleagues, who drafted a new constitution enabling us to register as an incorporated society registered under Dutch law. One of the first things we did was to halve the subscription rates, as some national bodies, particularly those in Southern Europe, mostly on the Mediterranean, could not afford to join. At the same time, we cut our costs, primarily by reducing the number of national representatives whose cost sweep of attending EMH meetings were met by us, the EMH. But notwithstanding this, I was keen to seek ways of increasing our income other than by subscription. For this reason, I entered discussions with Jan van Westerman, a German member of the German organization, to seek a sponsor who would be prepared to support the maritime heritage sector. Jan introduced Thomas and me to an international company based in Hamburg, ironically, led by a British chief executive officer. As a result, we have established a charity under German law, but sadly this coincided with the onslaught of COVID-19 restrictions. But they did pay for the cost of us setting it up, and I'm assured that they will continue their support for us. I have since retired as president of EMH due to an accident last year, so I rely on Scott Pereira as the Maritime Heritage Trust representative at EMH, and Brian Corbett as our nominated trustee on the Charity Board of Advisory Trustees to keep our flag flying. I think I've spoken probably for quite long enough, and I now pass the helm over to Thomas Hopper, who is EMH's Vice President and Honorary Secretary. So I don't know whether I hand back to you, Henry, but I'll leave you to introduce Thomas.
Thank you very much, David. We will just give me a moment or two to change the slides, and then we can restart with Thomas. Thank you. And just on cue, our current lead representative is about to join us. So right, Thomas, I hope you're with us, and it's with great pleasure that I hand over to you now as the Secretary of EMH to begin this section of the talk, and just wait for you to come online.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me? Is it working?
Yeah, we can see you and I can hear you.
Great, thanks. Well, just to start with, I'm a bit frightened by David's introduction because he called me the Honorary Secretary of EMH. Honorary normally means it's a lifetime job, and I very much hope that I'm not the lifetime Secretary of EMH. First of all, I'm from Germany. You may easily detect that from my accent. I am actually a member of the Daily Management Board of EMH since 2017. Daily Management Board is the you can say board of directors, which consists of João de Almeida from Portugal, who is our president, and who will speak to you a little bit later, and Niels Edwin List Petersen from Denmark, and myself. I'm actually vice president of EMH and have the job of a secretary. I will talk to you a little bit about what EMH achieved over the last, it's 35 years. It's quite a long time. Of course, you can't put 35 years in 15 minutes, but I will concentrate on some major events and major achievements of EMH. First of all, I will give you a short overview of what's happening, how EMH was set up, as far as I know. And then I will look into some particular areas of work in more detail. There are conflicting news about when EMH was founded. Some say it's 1993, some say it's 1995. Whatsoever, everybody is clear that it happened in Rotterdam. So someone should know, but I think after 35 years, it really doesn't matter. It was around, let's put it that way, 1995. And that was, of course, a time, I think many will remember, where there was in the 80s and 90s, there was a significant increase almost everywhere in Europe of the so-called traditional ships, which didn't exist, at least not in these numbers, in the 60s and 70s. Former professional vessels that were no longer just scrapped, but were used privately or commercially or in whatever way for their preservation as traditional ships. So with this relatively new phenomenon, in Germany, we had our first regulations about these kind of ships in 1991. Of course, we all experienced new problems, and most of us experienced the same problems. It starts with how do you certify such a ship. Nobody wants to certify an old ship. Difficult. How do you repair this ship? How do you sail to other countries? How do you operate these ships? How do you crew them? Where do you moor them? How do you finance them? And the worst, how do you tell your wife if you bought one? So it was really, really problems that were coming up from all sides. And it was quite natural that you could not solve these problems alone on their national level. So I think it was quite national, quite obvious that EMH was founded in these times and that the people from several countries met and thought, okay, this might be the way how we can solve our problems, maybe together.
Thomas, can I interrupt you a second? Are you seeing the right slide here?
I see no slide there. But,
okay, right. Just can you bear with me a moment, please?
Yeah.
And we'll try and...
It should be the second slide.
Yeah, sorry about that. Have you got a slide up now?
No, I haven't.
No, Henry, I think it's not shared.
Okay, just bear with me, please.
Okay. Thank God you know the history of image by heart, Thomas.
Well,
yeah,
but that's the wrong slide, but it's
no, we'll
correct presentation.
Yeah. Right, sorry about that.
No problem.
That's the beginning, so I'll go on one. Yeah.
Yeah, that is the right one.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem at all. Yeah, if I may pick up, and for that I need the pictures. It is many people were involved in the founding of EMH, and in hindsight, it is difficult and almost unfair to single out individuals, but nevertheless, I will do it. I'm unfair at this point, but I think it is, in my opinion, from what I learned from the history of EMH, without John Robinson from the United Kingdom and without Theodor Freuthoff from the Netherlands, I think EMH would not be what it is today. The enthusiasm and commitment was groundbreaking, and I think, and I hope David agrees with that, they were the, let's say, the brothers in heart. They were very close friends, and they were the people who were really setting up EMH and determining its fate in the first years. EMH today, not only today, from the beginning, has an uncommon structure. There's only one national member from each country. There can't be two. So it's, if someone is elected a national member, then this position is blocked. And this national member has to be an umbrella organization, so an association that bundles national interest. So with this structure, we want to make sure that we can really have the experts in EMH, and that we really have the organization in the nation state that really deals with historical vessels is member of EMH. That worked quite well. It worked so well that we didn't change that when we changed the constitution in 2017. But it has, of course, its flaws, especially if you look at countries that are having no umbrella organization for traditional vessels, which happens from time to time. But we always found solutions to that. In addition, we of course have memberships for museums, for other organizations that support our aims. So, and since 2019, I think there's also an achievement of David. Individuals can become member of EMH. We opened up a group called Friends of EMH. As a matter of principle, EMH works on a subsidiary basis. That means that national issues are only dealt with at the national level. EMH deals exclusively with the international aspects of maritime heritage and never interferes at home, so to say. So we will never look into, for example, if one country defines a historical vessel in one way and the other one defines it in another way, we will not interfere. It is completely up to the country to do that and many other things the way they want it. Today, EMH is, I think we can say that fairly, is the only and as such, of course, the most important NGO in Europe dealing with all aspects of maritime heritage. There is no one besides us. And the reason for that is, well, there are many reasons. One of them is that we are dealing with a relatively small sector. But the other reason is that we captured all relevant national organizations that are members in EMH now. So nobody else can start competing with us. We have a large number of important and in some cases reciprocal memberships. No, the other one, please, before. And there you can see the abbreviations of some of these organizations. It's a bit, I will not go through to this in detail, but what I can say is that EMH now after 35 years is a very well-established organization that is well recognized. And whenever you approach, let's say, the European Union or any other organization, they will immediately know who you are, and we are able to work with them. Could you change to the next slide, please? Yeah. I will now come to some, let's say, more specific areas of our work. The most important is, of course, culture. EMH is working through so-called councils, and we have a cultural council, which is the biggest council we have, and yeah, you could say it's in some ways it's the most important council, because culture is, of course, in the center of what we are doing. Cultural work is often by nature informal and largely based on networking, but we achieved some quite tangible results of our work, and the most important certainly is the Barcelona Charter. David mentioned it already, I will not repeat that, but the Barcelona Charter was set up by EMH and is, as David said, it is adopted in many, many countries, and I can add to that that the Barcelona Charter even made it into German national law. So it is widely recognized, and you can say it is a benchmark in its area. Nonetheless, the Barcelona Charter was released in the late 90s. It is a bit outdated, and we are actually working on an overhaul of it, but João will tell a little bit more about that later. In addition, the cultural work of EMH concerns the increasingly important intangible heritage, but also things like sail training, mainly on smaller ships, support of maritime festivals, as well as museum harbors as a new detected field of interest of EMH. Henry, can you switch this slide, please? Yeah. Yeah, now we come to the dark side of the moon, safety and regulations. Nobody likes to talk about it, but it's necessary, and it's unfortunately, we have to do it in Germany, in EMH, sorry. We are dealing with safety and regulations through the Safety and Environment Council, which is led by Hedda Lombardo, actually, who is the lady on the photograph on the right. The basic problem, I think I don't have to explain that, all of you know that. The basic problem is simple. Old ships cannot normally not meet modern safety regulations. That's a simple start, and the solution to that is getting more and more complex from year to year. And I think it's my estimate that the time that we are working in EMH on safety and regulations covers more than 50% right now of the entire time we are working. So it's to some extent eating us up, but it's of course a very, very important part of our work, because nobody can do it other than this department. However, I will not go into detail, because then we will talk about hours just about safety and regulations. If you have any questions about that, we can deal with that in the discussion later. But however, I would like to point to two significant achievements of EMH in this field. The first is the so-called Wilhelmshaven Memorandum of Understanding, which was first signed in 2000 and revised in 2005. It is about the mutual recognition of national traditional ship certificates in other countries. And in my humble opinion, and I can easily say that because at that time I was not involved in EMH, in my humble opinion, this represents the most important singular achievement of EMH's entire work. Imagine getting maritime authorities from, at that time, 8 countries together, discussing with them a legal text and having them undersigned this legal text is an outstanding achievement. And this was, you can say, 90% an achievement of EMH and the people who were leading it at that time. I think this is something that is difficult to copy, and it was really, really an outstanding achievement. The other thing I want to point out, because it's actually new, we have a new passenger ship directive, and we lobbied very much for more than 4 years, the Safety Council, for an exemption for sailing vessels and traditional vessels. On the picture on the right-hand side, you see us for a date with the European Commission, but we were also in Strasbourg, and we did a lot of lobbying, and the lobbying was quite successful, because in the passenger ship directive that has just been released a year ago, it is made clear that we now have a new exemption for sailing vessels from modern safety rules, which is very important for us. We do no longer have to discuss whether sailing vessels with engine are propelled by mechanical means or not. This is a clarification which helps us a lot on the national basis, and that again is a success of our work in EMH on the legal basis. One note on the situation on the inland waterways. As you may know, safety regulations differ very much between seagoing vessels and inland waterway vessels. For a long time, we didn't really deal with the situation on the inland waterways, but now we do. We have an Inland Waterways Council, and that is very important, because actually on the level of the Chesney Committee, which is the successor of the so-called Rhine Commission, they are actually negotiating conditions for traditional vessels, which is very important for us. And EMH is a so-called recognized observer of the Chesney Committee, so that gives us some strength in the discussions, and quite a good formal position. Just as a side note, I just read 3 weeks ago that the British government has also applied for joining the Chesney Committee as a recognized observer, so they are following up with us. That's great. Again, I don't want to go more into detail at this point, but these examples show very much that a purely national approach would have had no chance of even being noticed at this level. If we, with a relatively strong national organization in Germany, would have gone to Brussels at that time and would have started lobbying some regulations, they would simply send us home, go to your government, and your government can tell us. But as an international organization that represents a lot of countries, that represents the industry, and EMH does this. They received us with open arms. They listened to our arguments, and at the end of the day, they followed us in this situation. So only a pan-European organization like EMH can do this. Next slide, please. Henry?
Yeah.
The next one.
Yeah, seems to be a bit unresponsive at the moment. I'll stop it and start it again.
Oh. Well, I can possibly start because it's the next slide is without a picture, and it's just about funding, about money. I think they always spoke about funding in EMH, but never achieved it, and it was a big problem since the beginning of EMH. EMH was, maybe due to its organization with relatively few members, always quite expensive to join. David told already that in 2017 we cut the membership fees in half, but of course that caused a lot of, or potentially caused problems with the funding of EMH. So the question of how to fund our work, but also how to fund projects from our members gained more and more importance. And so in 2017, and that is also maybe David's achievement, we tackled the problem for the first time in a structured and serious manner. We started by, that's the next one. We started by transferring EMH into a legal entity. Yeah, there we are.
Apologies.
No problem. The first step was to set up a legal entity, which happened in August 2017. And the second was to set up a charitable foundation, which we did in 2019, and which is fully operative and fully acknowledged since January 2020. So that again is one of the big achievements from David's time as a president, the formalization, the formal legal status of EMH, as well as the setup of a fully working charitable recognition foundation operative all over Europe and recognized. And as it is in life, sometimes whenever you have the structures, the money follows. You already got a donation, which did not only cover the funding, the setup costs, but are a bit higher, and other donors are already on the doorstep. As you can imagine, the pandemic has delayed talks with potential donors, but we are quite happy that we achieved some money already, and there are some other donations coming up. The foundation has an international board of trustees. The British member is Brian Corbett, and we are actually looking for projects that can be financed through this foundation. To make it very clear, this foundation is allowed to spend its money all over Europe, but Europe is not the EU, it's much bigger. So if any of you has any ideas about a good charitable project that we can present to potential donors, please come forward to us or to Brian, whatsoever. And the better the idea is, the easier it is to get money for that. So we are, again, funding is something for the future, but we set up the structures, and so we can now start working on the details. Next and last one.
Yeah, it's being rather sticky tonight.
The last one is a picture of David, so we have to see. Yeah, there we are. So that was my, let's say, short tour through EMH in the past. You cannot compress 35 years in 15 minutes, or how long it took, I don't know, without forgetting or skipping many issues. So please apologize for that. This was really a race course through EMH. But I will not leave the floor without stressing that networking is and still was always and still is the most important and also the most effective tool of EMH. And this networking, which we were very good in, suffered enormously from the pandemic, and we need to reinstate that as soon as the general situation allows it. Then we can again join forces, exchange experience, make friends again, which we did very successfully in the past. And now I would like to hand over to Zhao directly, our president, who will tell you about our visions of EMH in the future. Thank you.
Thomas, thank you very much indeed. That was great, and sorry that we had one or two interruptions.
No problem at all.
So I'm just, yes.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know if you wanna. We could share from here. It's perhaps not too responsive from there. Do you want me to try from this end?
It was getting sticky. It was getting sticky in places. So
would you be so kind as to allow sharing?
Yeah.
Let's have a try. I think you have to accept it, right?
I've got it on multiple participants. So
okay. Unless it's not allowed in this configuration, I don't know. Well, if not,
shall I go back to mine?
Please do.
Yeah.
No worry. Yes.
Let's see how we get on.
Thank you, Henry.
Far away. Thank you, Zhao.
Okay, may I start?
Please do, yes. Introducing you as the new president of EMH, Zhao de Almeida.
Thank you, Henry. Well, I'd like to start by telling you that it's an enormous honor and pleasure to address you all tonight before our UK national member, the MHT, Maritime Heritage Trust. And this you will see across the slides, and I promise to be short, how much important for us your presence, your participation, your joining forces with us is today. A second word to thank all my predecessors, here represented by my dear friend David Morgan, for having done such a sterling job over these years. As a matter of fact, David and Thomas, my dear colleague at the Daily Management Board, has also stressed it. You did, in fact, an extremely important job all over the years. Everything I will share with you about the future wouldn't have been possible with this work being done by so many fellows, and especially in the very last decade, where the EMH has progressed in several fields. So thank you. But I have also to say that although David has handed the helm of EMH to me last October, is of course far from retiring, and I very much count on his guidance and advice still today and in the future as well. So thank you, David, for your hard work. Thank you to all my predecessors. Having said that, allow me to, well, please, Henry, could you? Okay. Basically, of course, I'm not a visionary, but we need some kind of vision. And even before we go into any kind of formulation for the EMH vision in strategic terms, I have to tell you that my statement here, the one I'm reproducing what I said last October in our General Assembly, when I took the helm from David. Basically, what I want to do in my role as the president of the EMH is to work with you and join forces with partners in such a way that we increase the sustainability of maritime heritage. And by doing so, I also believe we will be contributing to a more sustainable world. It might sound a little bit like a statement from a politician, but you will see that we are going to try to translate this very general, very broad statement into action. Henry, please. Well, and we started to put up an exercise for compile some strategic directions or routes. Please make no mistake, it doesn't mean that the EMH was having no strategy. The point is that we need today to communicate and to summarize it on a very understandable way for many, many new targets. And if I may shortly talk you through this diagram, which summarizes basically our current strategic thinking, ongoing strategic thinking, and it's an ongoing task we have now in hands. Basically, we start from the bottom with internal activities and tasks, and they are basically related to modernizing and strengthening the organization. In general, we believe that only a strong association can do and can be impactful and effective in promoting the cause of maritime heritage, of course. Secondly, we very much need to keep on strengthening our partnerships policy programs and initiatives. And this is what we consider still at the internal level. For the external, basically on the left-hand side, you see on the second column, the goals. First goal, number 3, we came to the conclusion that the concept of maritime heritage may need to be, to some extent, updated. What David said in his presentation is completely right. The Barcelona Charter has been a fantastic achievement. We have no doubts about it. But across the years, because it's now more than 20 years since its adoption, what we are progressively seeing is that maritime heritage is being sort of left to a second place in the overall heritage agenda globally. And there are 2 or 3 main reasons for that we need to think about and to discuss among ourselves. For me, in my very humble point of view, the main reason is that there is only one UNESCO convention on maritime heritage, and this is for the underwater heritage. No word, almost no word about afloat, and almost no word about intangible maritime heritage assets. So it's only natural that we may be sort of relegated to a second place or third place in the priorities lists of policymakers and other very important international organizations dealing with cultural heritage in general. So our idea about the Barcelona Charter is to keep the part we already know, which has been brilliantly devised, brilliantly drafted, and to add up, especially on the immaterial, intangible assets, and also to come up with some retouch of the maritime heritage concept. In general, last remark on these, the idea is to be as inclusive as possible. I give you just 2 or 3 examples to illustrate what I mean with being more inclusive. We keep on talking about historic vessels owners or traditional boats owners, and we will keep doing so, no doubt. What I mean we need to do is to add up different realities which are still related to the main actor, which will be always the boat, the vessel, or the ship. But it goes much beyond that. By doing so, we are utterly convinced that we can reach out to broader audiences and to reach out to different targets. And especially when it comes to policy making, I think we may be much more effective. It's also important to enable the activity our dear associate members are pursuing on a daily basis. So we need to keep the fight, if I may use the word, for building a fairer and friendlier regulatory framework. Thomas has addressed already a number of issues. David has also did a great deal of interventions on this very field, and we really need to find and to strike new balances between the heritage and the current and its operation today. Last but not least, number 5, securing the future. I think it's quite evident that one of our objectives relates to winning the minds and hearts of the so-called Z generation. Basically, we did a short survey among our dear members, and we found out that the average age of people directly involved with civil society organizations doing activities or with the purpose to promote, preserve maritime heritage is quite mature, if I may put it this way. So we really need to speed up our marketing programs and to devise programs, activities, and initiatives to bring these new generations on board our cause. Otherwise, our cause will live along our side, ourselves. So I think this is really a very important topic for enhancing or to enhance the sustainability of the maritime heritage cause. Henry, please, another slide, and I promise to go as fast as possible. Here, I do not resist to do a short comment on the picture I've chosen to this slide. Well, it's an old chart portraying Europa in the early 16th century. And I chose it because I do not want to forget to mention that in our view of EMH, Europe is much older than the European Union, and as far as the maritime heritage is concerned, there was no Brexit whatsoever. And I want to be this explicit. We keep working with you, and we want to strengthen our relation because we are very much aware about the wealth of the maritime heritage coming from the UK. So it would be completely nonsense not to keep on working together. As far as we are concerned at EMH, we are really, really willing to keep as close as possible with you. Nothing has changed for us with the Brexit. Having said that, on the cultural heritage side in general, I have already addressed 1 or 2 issues about the Barcelona Charter. Basically, we want it to be a bit wider and more inclusive, and I spoke about inclusiveness in this regard. And I quote here, the boat or the vessel or the ship. I've been through a very interesting article by a British author about the concept of these 3 different words in proper English and also from the legal perspective. For simplicity, I use the word boat here, but I want to be as broad as possible. The boat will be always at the center, no doubt. But maritime heritage goes much beyond. What we need to do is to establish and to promote the linkage between this core actor, which is the boat, with a number of different realities surrounding or related to boats and to maritime and inland waters navigation. An example of this is concerning the heritage harbors. And I think the momentum is coming soon. And I have here to address my compliments to MHT for the excellent work that you guys are performing in relation to the heritage harbors. You started to develop the concept. You've been putting a strategy and a partnership program together. And I think we are very much keen to follow up and to join your efforts and to see how we can basically learn with you. And thereafter, we want to replicate and to share these across other countries where we are present. Another slide, please, Henry. Well, safety and regulatory framework, another comment on the picture. It's fabulous. I must confess that by ignorance, I was not aware that the life jacket was a British invention. Correct me if I'm wrong, but according to my research, I found that the life jacket was invented by a British captain, Captain Ward, from the Royal National Lifeboat Institution. And I think this is great, and it shows, as many other examples about the value of the UK in the maritime heritage scene or area. Well, on the safety and regulatory framework, but I chose this picture because the problem with safety and the regulatory framework is, again, the need we have to strike a balance between to adopt new and up-to-date safety rules, devices, tools, techniques, and still to operate boats or vessels which have been built and operated in completely different times and eras. I give you an example, and I think we have to be reasonable, first of all. Of course, there is no reason to sail a 16th century ship, a caravel from the Vasco da Gama army without wearing a life jacket today. What's the reason? No reason whatsoever. But what's the reason for adapting this vessel, this replica, in such a way that it becomes something else and not transmitting or sharing the initial identity of this asset as we wanted to do with the replica? To strike a balance is really the key when we talk safety and regulatory framework for the maritime heritage. We are in the now preparing a white paper on solutions for international travel on traditional boats and historic vessels. We are very much aware about the difficulties whenever we invite discussion about these concepts. What a traditional boat is, what an historic vessel is something different. Okay, we are very much aware of the background of these discussions, but we have the damn duty to keep on with this topic. And for that, among other initiatives with other partners, we will be addressing the International Maritime Organization based in London, as you know, to discuss some issues relating to safe operation of traditional boats. And we will also keep the existing dialogue with European Union and other states of Europe on harmonization of the regulatory framework. Again, a thank you for those who made the Memorandum of Understanding possible a couple of years ago. An excellent job, I'd say. Henry, please. On the environment, again, the very same issue. How can we strike a balance? Because let me tell you something. There is nothing wrong with having a replica of a very old boat or ship or vessel in a museum room. Nothing wrong if the alternative is not to have anything. But whenever we have a replica or a preserved or a boat that has been rebuilt, even if it is, even if it was very, very antique, again, the problem here, and what we have to do is strike a balance between having a number of these boats and ships which represent a vivid testimony of the initial reality, or not to have, and to try and adapt as much as possible without decharacterizing the vessels, to adopt and adapt to new rules and standards. And this is very much related to, for instance, the coal-fired steamships. Scott Pereira is with us tonight. I saw him already. He knows very well what we are talking about here. We are talking about engine emissions in general, black and gray water disposal, use of traditional paint, last but not least, navigation rules for or within protected areas. Again, here, this is summarizing. These are topics which are on our priority list, where we need to work with partners, with experts, and to establish or continue to be in dialogue with policymakers. Henry, please. As far as funding is concerned, Thomas has already addressed a very important achievement, recent achievement, with the setup of a charity, a foundation governed by the German law in this case. As far as the funding sources are concerned, we are very much thinking about the EU project-based funding, of course, as possible fundable projects. We would mention the Heritage Harbours, an Heritage Harbours handbook, the setup of a network of wooden boat builders. I know you have at MHT a very important association or a partner from this sector, the wooden boat builders. We are also very much concerned with the need for promoting the rebirth of endangered heritage crafts. One of these days, in many of our countries, we will really struggle to find anybody with the necessary expertise to do the most common maintenance to old or classic boats, for instance. We are also thinking about an EMH patron program, focusing on restoration, preservation, research, outreach, and education. And we would really like to do all these directions or fields. They make sense altogether. It's quite ambitious, but it's highly needed, I'd say. Finally, sponsorship agreements for special events or programs. Well, among other innovative ideas, there's a lot we could do with promoting sailing with vulnerable groups, namely youngsters. I think it's also important to showcase the social inclusion perspective of maritime heritage, in addition to the environmental perspective, which is very much in the EU agenda today for the cultural heritage in general. But again, they are very much thinking about monuments and inshore sites. No word about what I call the wet area of cultural heritage. So we really have to fight in a positive sense to regain a place in the policy making agenda internationally, because you can do the exercise. I'm not really exaggerating here. If you go out of the maritime heritage community, which is very much groups like us tonight, you will struggle to find the word sea, maritime, boat, vessel, ship, sailor, wooden boat, etc., in all policy documents, etc., etc. So I think we really need to strengthen our organizations to keep this fight ongoing. Henry, please. I'm about to finish. Well, there's a lot, of course, to do if we really want to pass on to future generations. Actually, even if I risk to do some pro bono advertising, I do not resist to quote here one of the most famous advertising campaigns of the watch industry ever. It is now more than 40 years. Is very much related to heritage in general, because there's a watch brand that came up with a very interesting advertising claim. They were saying, you never actually own a, and then the brand, the watch brand, you merely look after it for the next generation. It's brilliant. It's basically summarizing in a very, very nice way our role as maritime heritage, as people concerned with maritime heritage. We actually do not own any of these heritage assets. We look after them to pass on over to the next generations. But on a daily basis, again, what we have to do, well, we really want to expand to more countries and more organizations in each country. I must confess something tonight. I didn't even share this with my dear fellows at the Daily Management Board. I would really like to visit you in UK, MHT, and to, well, pandemic allowing, of course, to discuss very concrete ideas and to share ideas and to come up with practical suggestions on how to reach out to more organizations. We really need to be stronger, and we are not really happy with the fact that we have one very important national member on board. We really want to go further, I'd say deeper. There's a capillarity in each country we need to look after. And so not only to expand to more countries, but to more organizations in each country. And of course, we need to organize events like these. I've been following your events recently on these webinars, and I must congratulate you for brilliant organization and very, very interesting topics being addressed. We are looking very much to do more or less the same. And we, of course, need to adopt a new communication strategy and policy if we are to reach out and if we are to win the hearts and minds of the Z generation. Otherwise, we will be really not heard by those audiences. Last but not least, I think we have this challenge in common, my dear friends. We need to further professionalize the European Maritime Heritage Association. We struggle very much with this objective. And I think, to be very honest, we will only succeed in doing this once we've got some funded projects through which we could, to some extent, fund some permanent resources for our organization. Also on this, we have, I think, a lot to learn with you from the MHT. And I think this was my very last slide, Henry, just for say yes, okay. So thank you very much. We will be really open and willing to exchange, to cooperate, and even before that, we are really looking forward to keep learning with you, because you are very, very much experienced in these maritime heritage related activities. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed. That's a very thought-provoking and challenging mission that you've left us with.